Many people are stuck in analysis paralysis. You've been hustling since you were a teenager. What drives that urgency and what advice would you have for people that are kind of stuck?
This goes all the way back to my childhood. First business I started was a dog treat business, contradicting the path I was supposed to be on. I started building websites like on a contract basis. That took me down this whole other rabbit hole into technology. If you feel that urge, chase it. When I made the decision to start a company, it wasn't even a question of, oh, maybe I should go to college, maybe I shouldn't. I have conviction in this and I'm going to do it. I'm going to run through whatever wall is put in front of me to try to make this happen and very aggressively pursue it. If you're not completely obsessed with what you're trying to build, you're going to hate it.
Tell us about your family life and also what was your first successful entrepreneurial business that you started in Georgia?
That's a great question. Yeah, so I grew up in Georgia. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked in tech, was a software engineer. And I always had, for whatever reason, this kind of entrepreneurial endeavor. And I think it's partially because, my dad had a business in sort of the 90s. And like I sort of was around that and it was exciting to me. And so I think I kind of caught the bug from him. But when I was a little kid, first business I started was a dog treat business. With help from my parents, got a recipe to make dog treats. And I would make these dog treats and bake them in the oven. And my cost of ingredients was, I don't know, like 10 cents per dog treat. And I would sell them for, 50 cents a dog treat and go sell them to my neighbors. And all my neighbors were great and, bought the dog treats and probably threw them away, not knowing what was in them. But it was a great little business. And I sort of was able to make some money with that. And then I started doing a series of other businesses. I started like a little bike repair thing in my garage and I'd repair all the neighborhood bikes and make money that way. I was probably like 5 or 6 years old at this point. And then the first business I had that I think started to actually work a little bit better was making record bowls. And I realized you could buy old vinyl records for 25 cents, melt them into the shape of a bowl and sell them for like $20. And so
Wow. And where did you get the records?
I would just go to like, Goodwill or places like that and
Wow.
just buy a big stack of records basically for free. And so that I think better margins than most software companies on that business.
How did you make them or melt them into bowls?
It was super easy. You literally add just like a ceramic bowl shape, and I'd put it in the oven. I'd spray like some acrylic on it, put it in the oven, and it would melt over in a bowl shape. And I actually got them in like a little store in Georgia that was selling them, so I had some distribution. And when I was in middle school, I was in going into 7th grade. My family moved from Georgia to Colorado, and I had a customer base in Georgia that was buying my record bowls, and it's like, well, I don't want to set up a whole new, distribution channel in Colorado. And so I was like, well, I'll create a website. I'll sell these on a website. And then people in Georgia can buy them through my website. And this was kind of before you had like Squarespace and the website builders. Right. And so I was like, well, this can't be that hard. Like I'll build a website. And that sort of brought me down this rabbit hole of learning, basic coding, right? HTML, CSS, like really basic stuff, some JavaScript. And sort of learn how to build websites. And then that took me down this whole other rabbit hole into technology, but that's how it started.
So tell me about PIN, the biometric securities AI company. What problem were you trying to solve, first of all? And how does an 18-year-old land like a $10 million check for a company?
I've got some funny stories. So when I went into high school, my family moved again from Colorado to the San Francisco Bay Area, which is obviously, the epicenter of tech. And I was in high school and I was kind of doing all the stuff you're supposed to do to go to a good college. I played football, I wrestled, I was like the class president and did all that stuff. But like my side passion was startups and technology, which sounds absurd for a high schooler. But I started off like I had this base understanding of how to build websites, and so when I moved to the Bay Area, I started building websites like on a contract basis. I'd build a website for a coffee shop or a small business. It was a good business, and made some side money. And then I realized like, hey, instead of me doing all the work here, what if I find the customers and then I go subcontract to like offshore developers, and Eastern Europe or in the Philippines or whatever. So I started doing that, and that actually had like more scale and more leverage to it. It was working relatively well. It was so funny because I was like a sophomore or junior in high school, and I'd like be in class and I'd like have a call scheduled in the middle of my class. Be like, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom, and I'd, walk out and walk down the hallway in the corner, and I'd be on the phone with a customer who thinks I'm like a 35-year-old. Uh, but it worked well, and we had lots of fun. And then when I was going into my senior year of high school over my junior summer, I interned at a startup. Somebody who had gone to my high school who was like 10, 15 years older than me had a startup. And I met him, and he was super gracious and letting me work there over the summer. And, I ended up like building the mobile app and learned a lot. And it was the idea for the company was like a digital menu platform, which ended up not working out. But I was building the software and then like going door to door to restaurants trying to sell them this technology, and nobody really wanted it. And it was sort of the startup 101 experience.
You learned a lesson and applied it to a new idea later.
Exactly. So I was like, you know what? This is what I want to do with my life. Like I just want to build a company. Like I don't care about anything else. And this is sort of, contradicting the path I was supposed to be on of going to a good college and then, getting a graduate degree and doing that whole thing. I was thinking about starting a company before I went to college. I had a mentor of mine who was an executive at Salesforce, and I went and met him, and he basically said, hey, I'll be your first investor. I'll put $100,000 into the company and go try to build it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, you spend a year and you go to college. It's not the end of the world, but like the upside is uncapped. You could build the next Facebook or Google. The downside is capped. Like worst case scenario, you got cool experience and lost a year. And so I did it. And the first idea for that startup was terrible, which was to build a mobile payments platform for small businesses. So sort of taking digital menus and pivoting to mobile payments. And turns out we were trying to build a two-sided marketplace and we weren't solving a problem. And it was a terrible idea for a lot of reasons. Fortunately, we very quickly realized it was a terrible idea. And we ended up pivoting a couple of times. And ultimately what we ended on was, we spent a lot of time trying to sell a white label version of that platform to big retailers. And the retailers kept telling us like, hey, this doesn't solve a problem. Our big problem we're dealing with right now is fraud and chargebacks. And if you can solve that, then maybe we could talk. So we went down this rabbit hole and realized there's like this persistent problem, especially in e-commerce and in banking, which is you don't really know who's on the other side of a computer. You have maybe a username and a password, or somebody's credit card number, but you don't really know who that person is. And there wasn't a good way for you to verify that. And the whole sort of design or architecture of security has always been, if you want to make something more secure, you should add more friction, right? And so a simple way to think about this is, if you want your door to be more secure, you add another lock, right? If you want your website to be more secure, in addition to username and password, you have two-factor authentication, right? You make somebody, get a text to their phone or use an authenticator app. And we looked at that and said, well, that's kind of a terrible user experience. Like, if I'm a good user, why am I getting punished? Why do I have to go through these extra steps just to get into my bank account? And we sort of thought about this from first principles and said, well, there has to be another way to verify that this is an authentic user. And if you kind of think about this from first principles, the device that you're interacting with, a smartphone, a computer, it has a lot of other sensor inputs. So we can capture things like how you move a mouse, how fast you type. On a screen, like on a smartphone, you can see where in the screen you press, where in a button frame you press. And there was some research, some academic research that showed, if you look at these sort of data sources, the patterns from a user are relatively consistent. So the way that you type in your password, for example, is pretty consistent. The articulation on your phone, if you look at the sort of accelerometer and the different axes, like the amount you tilt your phone when you press, a number on the keypad is pretty consistent. We said, well, maybe we can take all these disparate sources of data, train machine learning models, and use that as a way to verify somebody's identity. So that if we've seen somebody interact with this computer 10, 20, 30 times before, the pattern should be relatively similar. And if they're totally dissimilar, like that's a flag where it might not be the same user. Right. And then you can force them to do two-factor authentication or create additional friction. So the idea was, let's create a way to not punish good users, but prevent the bad users from getting in. And so we ended up building this company up. I worked with some banks, worked with some healthcare companies, did a little bit of work with the government, built these models, built a great product, and made every single mistake you would expect a 18 or 19-year-old trying to build a company to make. And so had a great time and a lot of lessons.
Many people your age, particularly back then, are stuck in analysis paralysis. But you've been hustling since you were a teenager. What drives that urgency, and what advice would you have for people that are kind of stuck?
Good question. Whenever I've developed conviction in something, I like obsess about it and just like very aggressively pursue it. And it's a good thing and a bad thing, I think, in some sense. And this goes all the way back to my childhood, like this idea for record bowls and like, wanting to sell them online. It brought me down this rabbit hole where I forced myself how to learn how to build websites. And I've just always been, when I have an idea, I'm just obsessed with it. When I made the decision to start a company, like it wasn't even a question of, oh, maybe I should go to college, maybe I shouldn't. It was like, I have conviction in this and I'm going to do it. And, I'm going to obsess over it. I'm going to run through whatever wall is put in front of me to try to make this happen. So I don't know if I have great advice. If you feel that urge, chase it. And if you don't feel that urge, I think building a company in particular is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And you work with a lot of successful entrepreneurs who have built great businesses. And I think all would probably say the same thing, which is it's way harder than you expect it to be.
Ah,
It
yes, it
it's
is.
and
It
it
is.
takes it takes over your entire life. If you're not completely obsessed with what you're trying to build, you're going to hate it. You're going to be miserable and you're probably not going to succeed. So I think in the context of building companies, you have to be just completely obsessed and just have like, unwavering conviction in what you're doing.
I had the fastest growing company in Florida 2 years in a row, eighth fastest growing company in the US, 60 offices, 8 countries. But I failed in like 5 other businesses where I raised a lot of money. And you learn as you go, it's a roller coaster of ups and downs. You had said that you think this whole AGI thing is nonsense. And I think this whole work life balance, the same thing. I am an obsessive, like you, personality when I want things. And my wife says, God, you're so obsessive. And I said, yeah, that's why I got you. We wouldn't be married had I not been obsessed chasing you. You left me like 5 times. And I had to, call your grandmother, tell her, hey, sorry. It's like, hey, yeah. And I think that people that are successful don't have very good work-life balance. You were just telling me that you haven't spent like 4 weeks straight in LA for, I don't know, how many years?
No, it's true. And, I'm super fortunate. So I'm getting married next year. Uh,
Congratulations.
to my fiance, and we've been together since high school. And so
Oh my
she
goodness.
knew me. We were dating before my first startup, before Penn, and so she's sort of always known me in this
We
context.
we gotta we gotta we gotta teach you some sales techniques here. Eight,
I know, I
that's a
know.
long time.
It's a long time, and fortunately, so she sort of knew what she was signing up for on day one. I think you're right, though. For me, at least, my experience has been when I'm working by building my own company, building Penn or building the current venture capital firm that I'm building now. It doesn't. Most of what I'm doing doesn't feel like work. It's just it's what I love to do, and there are parts of it that I don't like. I don't like doing back office accounting work or anything like that. And I think what I've learned over time is I need to find great people, co-founders or hire people and delegate the things that I don't like doing that suck my energy out,
Or a good Replit agent you can build over
or
the
a good
weekend.
Replit agent, a good
Right.
AI tool, and focus on the things that I love. I love spending time with founders. Whenever I go spend time with a founder, it does not feel like work. Like the fact that I get paid to do this feels insane to me. And when I'm on vacation, like I can't help but like, you know, text a founder or like, go read a book about like it's just I just love it. And I think you're right. You have to totally integrate. You can't have work-life balance.